In the heart of Silicon Valley, brilliance often comes with a price. Ethan Lee, a quiet but determined Asian American student, poured his soul into building a revolutionary piece of software that could change the future of communication. For months, he worked in silence, coding through sleepless nights, dreaming that his creation would finally give him the recognition he deserved. But dreams can shatter in an instant. When the day of presentation came, Ethan's world collapsed. His professor, the very man he trusted, handed credit for his invention to a privileged white classmate, praising him as the genius of tomorrow. Ethan's protests were silenced, his reputation crushed and his future stolen before his eyes. Years later, Ethan rises from the ashes. Against all odds, he builds his own company, turning the same stolen idea into a billion-dollar empire. But destiny twists again when his old classmate, now failing and desperate, reappears in his life. Now Ethan faces the hardest question of all. Will he choose revenge or redemption? This is not just a story about technology. It's a story about betrayal, resilience, and the fight against a system where racism hides behind polished smiles. The glow of a laptop was the only light in Ethan Lee's dorm room. It was well past midnight, yet he remained at his desk, eyes fixed on the shifting lines of code. His fingers danced across the keyboard in a rhythm he had trained into himself, steady, relentless, tireless. To most, the dark hours belonged to sleep, but to Ethan they belonged to creation. For months, he had worked on this project, feeding it his dreams, his exhaustion, and the fragile hope that it would one day prove he was more than just another quiet, forgettable face in the lecture hall. The program he built was no ordinary translator. Unlike clumsy apps that spit out stiff phrases, his invention understood tone, emotion, and context. A Spanish lullaby carried its tenderness. A Mandarin proverb held its wisdom. For Ethan, it wasn't just code. It was a bridge between worlds, and tomorrow, in front of professors, classmates, and investors, he would finally unveil it. He imagined the applause, the recognition, the way his parents back home would beam with pride when they heard his name. He let himself believe, just for one night, that merit alone would be enough. But Ethan had long felt the invisible wall that surrounded him. In class, his answers were often brushed aside until repeated by someone louder. His careful observations were drowned out by confidence wrapped in privilege. And though he never said it aloud, he felt the weight of being seen as the quiet Asian kid who knew the tech stuff, but not the spotlight. Still, he clung to the belief that brilliance could not be ignored. The morning came. The lecture hall buzzed with excitement, filled with professors in stiff suits and investors with sharp eyes. Ethan sat nervously with his laptop, heart pounding as he waited for his name to be called. But when Professor Harrington's commanding voice filled the room, Ethan's stomach dropped. Today, the professor announced, we'll be hearing from Bradley Cooper, who has been working on an extraordinary project in real-time translation. Ethan froze. Bradley, the golden boy with a perfect smile, a family fortune, and connections deep in Silicon Valley, rose confidently and strode to the front. Behind him, Ethan's slides lit the projector. His design, his code, his months of sleepless nights, Ethan's whisper cracked in his throat. "That's mine." Harrington silenced him with a dismissive glance. "Sit down, Mr. Lee. We'll speak after." And then the betrayal unfolded in full. Brad presented Ethan's work as if it were his own. The program ran seamlessly, drawing gasps and applause from the audience. Investors leaned forward eagerly, murmuring about vision and genius. The word genius burned in Ethan's ears like acid. When the clapping began, it was thunderous. Ethan sat paralyzed, invisible in plain sight. His invention, his dream, was alive on the stage, but his name was nowhere near it. Later, when he confronted Harrington, the professor's coldness was worse than the theft. "You're talented, Ethan," he said, "but you're not the face investors want. Brad is. You should be grateful your work is being recognized at all." Ethan's chest tightened as Harrington leaned closer. His voice dropped, heavy and final. "If you make a fuss, you'll never work in this industry. Remember that." That night, while the campus celebrated Brad in the newspaper and professors toasted to his brilliance, Ethan sat in his dorm room with the glow of his laptop mocking him. His dream had been stolen, and with it, the fragile belief that merit was enough. He packed his things quietly at the end of the semester, his departure unnoticed. But deep inside, where humiliation met fury, a small ember refused to die. The silence after betrayal. For months after graduation, Ethan Lee lived in silence. He rented a small studio apartment on the edge of San Jose, surrounded by stacks of instant noodle cups and half-finished sketches of code. The betrayal had hollowed him out. Each time he opened his laptop, he saw Brad's face on magazine covers, interviews, and glowing headlines. "Young visionary breaks language barriers. Bradley Cooper, the future of tech." Every word was salt in his wounds. Yet, even in despair, Ethan couldn't stop coding. At night, when the city lights blinked outside his window, he poured his anger and grief into the keyboard. He rebuilt his software from scratch, but this time he went deeper. He taught the program not only to translate words, but to understand context, culture, and emotion. He wasn't chasing applause anymore. He was chasing truth. Still, the sting of racism haunted him. He remembered Harrington's words, "You're not the face." Those words followed him like a curse, reminding him of every time he had been overlooked, underestimated, or ignored. But instead of breaking him, they hardened him. The first break, it was a rainy afternoon when Ethan's life changed. He was sitting in a cafe, headphones on, fine-tuning his program, when a stranger tapped his shoulder. "Excuse me," the woman said. I couldn't help overhearing. "Is that real-time translation?" Ethan froze. He had accidentally left the program running, and it had just translated a conversation between two tourists at the next table. "Yes," Ethan admitted hesitantly. The woman's eyes widened. "I work for Connect World, an NGO that helps refugees. Do you realize what this could do for displaced families who don't share a common language?" That night, Ethan gave his first real demonstration, not to investors or professors, but to aid workers desperate for a solution. They saw more than technology. They saw hope. Within weeks, Connect World began using Ethan's software in refugee camps. Children who had been isolated by language could suddenly play together. Doctors could speak to patients without fumbling for interpreters. Families torn apart by borders could understand each other again. For the first time, Ethan felt what Harrington and Brad could never steal: purpose. Building from the ground up word spread quickly. A journalist covering Connect World wrote an article titled, "Quiet Coder Gives Refugees a Voice." Unlike the polished magazine spreads about Brad, this story was raw and human. It wasn't about a CEO in a suit. It was about a man working alone, in a cramped apartment, creating something that mattered. Investors who had ignored Ethan suddenly wanted meetings. Startups wanted partnerships. By the following year, Ethan had founded his own company, Lingua Bridge. He wasn't flashy. He didn't wear $1,000 suits or give TED Talks with dramatic hand gestures. But what he built spoke louder than charisma. Lingua Bridge grew into a global platform used by hospitals, schools, humanitarian groups, and even governments. Ethan's name finally began to appear, not in the shadow of others, but in his own right. Still, he carried the scars of betrayal. He refused to take outside funding at first, fearing that someone would try to steal his work again. He hired a small, diverse team, many of whom had also faced discrimination in tech. Together, they worked not for applause, but for impact. The ghost returns, but ghosts have a way of returning. One morning, Ethan opened his email to find a name he hadn't seen in years: Bradley Cooper. The subject line read, "Urgent, need to talk." Ethan's chest tightened. He almost deleted it, but curiosity got the better of him. The message was short. "Ethan, I know we haven't spoken since college. I need your help, please. My company is collapsing and you're the only one who can save it. Can we meet?" Ethan stared at the screen for a long time. Part of him wanted to laugh. The golden boy, the future of tech, was failing. The world that had once celebrated Brad was now forgetting him, and now the thief was crawling back. The meeting, they met in a glassy high-rise downtown, but the man sitting across from Ethan was not the same Brad from college. His hair was thinner, his smile forced, his confidence cracked. "Ethan," Brad said, almost pleading, "I know you probably hate me. I don't blame you. But listen, I need you." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You stole everything from me. My work, my future. And now you want my help." Brad swallowed hard. "I didn't build the tech. You know that. Harrington told me it was the only way. He said investors would never back." Well, he stopped himself, but Ethan understood. "Never back someone like you?" The silence was heavy. Brad continued, desperation in his voice. "The truth is, my company is a house of cards. Investors are pulling out. I can't keep up. Your Lingua Bridge, it's what I dreamed mine would be. Please, merge with me. Save me." Ethan leaned back, his eyes burning with memories of that lecture hall, the applause, the humiliation. Every fiber of him screamed for revenge. But then he remembered the refugees, the children laughing together. The patients finally understood. His work wasn't about revenge, it was about connection. The choice Ethan spoke slowly, his voice steady. "You had everything handed to you, Brad. You didn't just steal my work, you stole my dignity. And now you want me to save you?" "No." Brad's face fell, "but," Ethan continued, surprising even himself, "I'm not going to destroy you either. I'll give you advice. Own up to what you did. Tell the truth. Stop pretending to be what you're not. Because until you do, no company, no merger, no investor will ever save you." Brad's eyes filled with something Ethan had never seen in him before. Shame. Ethan stood, gathering his things. "I built Lingua Bridge without you. Without Harrington. Without anyone's permission. And I'll keep building it. Not for you, not for me, but for the people who need it." And with that, he walked away.
Brad's shadow lingered in Ethan's mind long after that meeting in the glass high-rise. The man who had once stood in front of a cheering lecture hall, basking in applause for work that was not his, now sat crumbling under the weight of his own lies. Ethan had walked away, but the echo of his own words followed him. Tell the truth. Own what you did. Weeks passed, and whispers began to spread. A journalist uncovered inconsistencies in Brad's company filings. Former employees leaked that he had never written a line of code himself. Finally, in a desperate attempt at redemption, Brad stood before cameras and confessed, hesitant, faltering, but unmistakably true. He admitted that the project that had launched him to fame in college had not been his. It had belonged to Ethan Lee. The revelation rippled across the industry. Articles rewrote their narratives. Investors who once celebrated Brad now turned their attention to Lingua Bridge, but Ethan, when asked for comment, said only this: "My work has always been about connecting people, not dividing them. That is all." He gave no interviews, sought no revenge, and let the truth stand on its own. Years passed, and Lingua Bridge became more than a company. It became a movement. Hospitals across continents used its software to save lives. Classrooms brought children from different nations together without fear of misunderstanding. Humanitarian workers crossed borders armed with nothing but Ethan's code and compassion. Wherever language had once been a wall, Lingua Bridge built a door. Ethan rarely spoke about the betrayal anymore, though it lived in him like a scar, a reminder of how quickly brilliance could be silenced when it did not wear the right face. But he also carried something stronger, the knowledge that resilience could outlast prejudice, that truth had a way of clawing its way into the light. On a quiet evening, years after that night in the dorm room, Ethan found himself back at his desk. His apartment was larger now, his life fuller, but the glow of the screen still cast the same pale light on his face. He typed with the same steady rhythm, building new bridges line by line. Outside, the world debated his genius, his legacy, his place in history. But inside, Ethan thought of the refugee children laughing together, of strangers who could now speak as if they had known each other all their lives. He thought of connection, the simple human thread that had always been his true invention. And when he paused, staring at the code that stretched across his screen, he allowed himself a quiet smile. The dream had been stolen once, but it was his again. Entirely, irrevocably his. In the years that followed, Ethan Lee's name became inseparable from the story of Lingua Bridge. Universities taught his work not as a tale of algorithms and code, but as a lesson in perseverance. His invention broke barriers, yes, but his life proved something deeper. That silence imposed by others could be broken. That dignity stolen could be reclaimed. Racism had tried to erase him in that lecture hall. Harrington's cold dismissal, Brad's theft, the audience's thunderous applause for the wrong man, those moments might have buried another dreamer forever. Yet Ethan refused to stay buried. He rose not with vengeance, but with vision. In doing so, he redefined what it meant to succeed. People often asked him, in interviews he reluctantly gave, whether he had forgiven Brad or Harrington. Ethan would pause, thoughtful, before answering, "It's not about them anymore. It never really was. My work was always about people who needed to be heard." And in that answer lay the truth. Racism had stolen his stage, but it had not stolen his voice. His legacy was not built on the applause of those who once doubted him, but on the laughter of children, the relief of patients, the hope of strangers finally understood. Ethan Lee had turned betrayal into bridge work, and in doing so, proved that no barrier, neither language nor prejudice, was strong enough to silence him.